Tonight, the lamps burn dim behind frosted glass, and snow hushes the cobblestone streets of London. The year is 1843, a time when the air tastes of chimney smoke and mulled spice, and church bells drift like memories through the fog. The city sleeps beneath a thin quilt of winter light. Yet, behind rows of soot-darkened houses, stories still stir, stories of warmth and candlelight, of carols whispered by firesides, and of unseen presences that linger between the walls. Outside, horse-drawn carriages move past gas lamps, their wheels muffled by snow. Inside, hearths crackle, shadows dance along wallpaper, and families gather close, some to celebrate joy, others to remember what they've lost. There's a peculiar beauty to this night, part comfort, part mystery, as if time itself has paused to listen to the heartbeat of 1,000 homes. Winter has a way of making the world feel smaller, closer to something ancient. Tonight's tale lives in that tender space between memory and dream, a Victorian Christmas where laughter and loneliness walk together, where old ghosts are greeted not with fear, but recognition. You'll hear of traditions born in candlelight, whispers that linger past midnight, and the faint silver veil that separates the living from the dearly departed. But before we begin, take a breath. Whether you're listening from the US, Europe, Asia, or somewhere quiet and far away, welcome. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it where you are? Pull the curtains closed, dim the lights, settle beneath your blanket. Let the world outside fade into silence. Breathe slowly. Let your mind drift back to the winter of 1843, when every candle flame was a promise and every snowfall carried a secret. When you're ready, we'll begin. And our journey starts in the narrow streets of London on Christmas Eve, where one lonely traveller will discover that even the coldest winter can hold a quiet light. The night had fallen completely, heavy as velvet, muffling every sound under its steady drift of snow. Gas lamps glowed like small golden moons, their light catching in the swirling flakes. Along the river, the water moved sluggishly under a film of ice, reflecting the dim shimmer of lamps that lined the embankment. Footsteps echoed faintly from time to time, but mostly the streets were still. The city seemed to breathe softly, half asleep. Through that quiet whiteness walked a man wrapped in a long wool coat, his hat dusted with snow, his boots sinking deep into the drifts with each soft crunch. His name was Thomas Whitby, a bookseller from Clerkenwell, though tonight he was far from home. A small satchel crossed his chest, holding a single letter, creased, sealed in red wax, and heavy with meaning. The kind of letter you carry for days before you dare to open it. The air smelled of iron and wood smoke, with a trace of roasted chestnuts from a distant cart. Snowflakes kissed his cheeks and clung to his lashes. His fingers were numb, yet he found the night strangely beautiful. London was transformed, its sharp edges softened beneath the snow, its noise buried under a white hush. Thomas paused beneath a flickering street lamp, watching his breath curl like smoke. From nearby windows came the faint glow of hearths and the muffled echo of carols. God rest you merry, gentlemen, carried through the frozen air. The melody tugged at something deep within him, something half-remembered, a Christmas from his boyhood, his mother's laughter, the scent of cloves and orange peel drifting through their small home. But tonight, he was alone. He turned down Caldwell Lane, a narrow, crooked street. Icicles hung like glass daggers from the eaves, candlelight flickering weakly from upper windows. Somewhere a church bell tolled 11, 1 hour until Christmas morning. Thomas slowed. He'd been walking towards something, or maybe away from it. Through the curtain of snow he saw a faint light. It shimmered cold and bluish, unlike any house lamp. For a long moment he stood motionless as snow gathered on his shoulders. Then, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name, he stepped toward it. The world fell away, the sound of the city, the scent of the river, until there was only that silvery glow and the beat of his heart in the stillness. Then, faint but clear, came a voice. "Thomas Whitby, you've walked so far to find what you've already lost." He froze. The voice was soft, almost kind, carried on the breath of falling snow. The light flickered like a candle in a draught and vanished. He stood there a long while until the cold began to bite through his coat. Then he drew out the letter, brushed the snow from its seal, and whispered, "Perhaps it's time." Before he could open it, the church bells struck midnight. 12 slow, solemn notes. And from the far end of the lane came footsteps. They were not his own. Steady, deliberate, hollow. Thomas turned. The lane stretched empty, dimly lit by a single lamp. No one there. Yet the footsteps drew closer, impossibly near. A chill ran down his spine, not fear, but something deeper. He called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then the lamp flame flickered blue. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a figure, a man in old-fashioned clothes, standing perfectly still where the snow lay deepest. His coat was high-collared, his hat casting no shadow. The air around him shimmered as if made of glass. Thomas blinked, and the figure was gone. Only the bells echoed, fading into the stillness of Christmas morning. He whispered, "A trick of the snow," though the words felt hollow. He tucked the letter away and kept walking. When he passed the alley where the stranger had stood, he saw footprints pressed into the snow, clear, sharp, and not his own, leading toward the river. He hesitated. Turning back would be the sensible thing. But something unseen pulled him forward. The prints wound past shuttered houses, through air thick with the scent of coal smoke and pine. They led to the old bridge over the Thames, pale arches rising ghost-like in the moonlight. The river below gleamed like black glass, beneath its crust of ice. Thomas stepped onto the bridge. The wood creaked. A cold wind rose carrying a faint, faraway melody, soft, sorrowful, like a lullaby. He followed the sound to the centre, where the lanterns no longer burned. There, on the railing, rested a single white feather, rimed with frost. When he touched it, warmth bloomed briefly through his glove, the warmth of a hand once held. He looked up and, in the shifting light, saw her. A woman, pale, kind, familiar. Then, like snow, she vanished. A whisper lingered. "Find what you lost before dawn." And then, nothing but silence. The sky began to pale. Christmas Day had come. Thomas lingered on the bridge long after the voice faded, his breath curling in the cold air. The snow fell endlessly, and the world felt suspended, caught between one heartbeat and the next. He drew out the letter again. The red seal gleamed faintly. The handwriting read, "To Thomas Whitby, from Eleanor." Her name trembled in him like a note struck on glass. He remembered her laughter, echoing between shelves of books, the scent of ink and lilac that always followed her, the warmth of her hand as they walked through the autumn fog. She had been his heart, and one winter fever had taken her. The doctors called it quick. He never forgave himself for not being there. The snow whispered as he broke the seal. The sound cracked sharp against the frozen water below. Inside was a single page folded neatly. Her handwriting, steady, graceful, unmistakable. "My dearest Thomas, if this reaches you, then I am nearer than you believe. I have watched you wander through too many winters, chasing the shadows of what was. Do not fear the past, nor hide from what it still holds. Tonight, when the clock strikes 1, Follow the light from your window, and you will find me once more, not as I was, but as I remain. Until then, remember the carol I taught you. Sing it softly, and I shall hear. Yours always, Eleanor. Thomas's throat tightened. His breath misted the parchment. The ink shimmered, fresh, as though written moments ago. He folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his chest. Then, faint but clear, he heard a melody weaving through the snow, a woman's voice humming the same lullaby Eleanor used to sing while closing the shop. Thomas turned toward the sound. Beyond the bridge, a light flickered, warm, golden, like candlelight shining through time. He followed. His boots left perfect prints in untouched snow, each step carrying him deeper into the still heart of the night. The light led him through narrow lanes, past frozen fountains and shuttered windows, until it stopped before a townhouse draped in ivy and frost. He knew this place, Eleanor's home. Its windows were dark, but a golden glow seeped through the cracks around the door. Thomas hesitated, hand on the iron latch. The ivy glittered with ice like glass leaves. He remembered her tending this garden in summer, her laughter mixing with the hum of bees. Now, only silence. He pushed open the gate. The hinges sighed. Snow hung motionless in the air, as if even time had paused to watch. He climbed the steps, and before he could knock, the door creaked open. Warm air drifted out, smelling faintly of beeswax, old wood and lilac. He stepped inside. The hall glowed with candlelight, dozens of flames flickering in brass holders. The air shimmered with a quiet presence. Thomas shut the door behind him. The world outside disappeared. A clock on the mantel ticked once, then stopped at 1. His heart beat faster. "Eleanor," he whispered. Silence. Then, softly, from deeper in the house, a piano. He followed the music down the corridor, past portraits and mirrors that reflected candlelight, but not his face. The parlour door was ajar. Warm light spilled through. Inside, the piano gleamed, dustless, as though newly polished, and seated before it was a woman in white, her back to him, hair pale as frost. The melody was slow, familiar, aching. "Eleanor," he breathed. She turned slightly, her face lit by the glow, serene, timeless. "You came," she whispered. He took a step toward her, but she raised a hand. "Don't speak," she said softly. "Not yet. Time is fragile here." She motioned to the chair beside her. "Sit with me, Thomas. There's much to remember, and the night grows short." He obeyed. The candles flickered, and for the first time in years, warmth spread through his chest. Not the warmth of fire, but of being seen. Outside, snow fell endlessly. Inside, silence lived, not empty, but full of all that had been left unsaid. Eleanor sat at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. Thomas watched her, scarcely daring to breathe. She looked exactly as he remembered her, the same calm eyes, the same quiet grace, the same soft smile that once steadied his heart through long, bitter winters. But now, her skin carried a faint shimmer, a pale silver light, as if she were carved from moonlight instead of flesh. He wanted to speak, to ask how this was possible, but something in her expression stopped him. That gentle, wistful calm told him everything and nothing at once. Instead, she began to play. The music drifted through the room like falling snow, soft, careful, each note landing with purpose. It was the carol she'd written herself years ago, the one they used to hum while closing the bookshop late at night. The melody wrapped around him, weaving memories through the air. Thomas closed his eyes. He saw the narrow aisles of the shop, the smell of dust and pine, the flicker of the hearth in the corner. He saw Elela Nena at the counter, counting change with ink-stained fingers. He heard the rain tapping softly at the windows, her laughter when he spilled ink across the ledger, the quiet comfort of her presence in every silent hour. When he opened his eyes, the candlelight blurred through his tears. "Elela Nena," he whispered, "I never said goodbye." She smiled faintly, her eyes still on the piano. "You did," she said gently, "but you've carried that moment so long, it forgot how to rest." Her words stirred the air like wind through a curtain. The candles flickered, their flames leaning toward her voice. Thomas swallowed hard. "Why now? Why tonight?" "Because Christmas is the hour between worlds," she whispered, "the night of remembrance. The living and the departed share its warmth when love still connects them." She turned to him fully now, her eyes soft and shining. "You've walked too long with sorrow as your only companion." He lowered his gaze. "I couldn't let you go." A tender silence followed. Then Elelenena reached across the space between them. Her hand hovered above his, not touching, but close enough that he felt her warmth, faint as sunlight through glass. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting." "It means remembering with peace." Thomas closed his eyes. For the first time in years, his breath came steady. The music continued beneath their stillness, rising and falling like a heartbeat. Outside, a distant church bell chimed twice, the hour of 2. The sound rolled through the snowy streets, carrying a strange comfort. When Thomas opened his eyes again, the room had changed. The candles burned brighter, shadows softened. The piano gleamed as though newly polished, and through the frosted window, the first faint trace of dawn brushed the sky. Elelenena's voice came softly. "Before the sun rises, I'll have to go." He nodded, his heart tightening. "Then let's not waste a moment." She smiled. The melody shifted, lighter now, almost joyful. "Then listen," she said. "The rest of the song is for you." The music deepened, flowing like a warm current through the air. Each note lingered, tender and glowing, before dissolving into silence. Thomas sat still, watching her hands move across the keys. The carol was familiar, yet different. Something new hidden beneath it, like a second voice woven through the first. It felt like both a farewell and a blessing. Her face was serene in the candlelight, both near and distant, as if she existed in two worlds, the woman he had loved and the memory she had become. The music filled every corner of the room until even the air trembled with it. Thomas began to hum along, unsteady at first, then stronger, finding harmony with her. Two melodies, one mortal, one ethereal, wove together like ribbons of sound. For a moment, the years between them vanished. There was only this. Two souls meeting again, through music, through memory, through love. When the final note faded, the silence that followed glowed with peace. Elelenena turned to him with a soft smile. "You remembered the harmony," she said. "I never forgot," Thomas whispered. "It was all I had left." Her gaze lingered. "Then promise me something. When dawn comes, open your shop again. Light the hearth. Let people find warmth in your books once more. That's what we built. A place where stories could live beyond us." He hesitated. "I don't know if I can." "You can," she said simply. "Because the living are keepers of memory, and memory is how love survives." Her words settled in him like glowing embers. He nodded, tears shimmering in his eyes. "Then I will." She smiled, a quiet, radiant smile that warmed the air. "Good," she whispered. "Then My song has done its work. The candles flickered. The wind sighed softly outside, brushing against the shutters. The snow had stopped. The world was still. Elena Nena looked toward the window, where the first blush of pink touched the horizon. "It's nearly morning," she said. Thomas stood, the chair creaking behind him. "Will I see you again?" Her eyes shimmered like calm water. "You'll feel me. In the turning of pages, in the warmth of the fire, in every carol when the nights grow cold." She rose from the piano and stepped closer. The air between them shimmered faintly, like heat above a flame. He could feel her nearness, not touch, but warmth. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "You've given me rest." Her voice trembled on the last word. Slowly, she began to fade, not vanishing, but melting into the growing light. Her outline softened until she was only a whisper of gold in the dawn air. Thomas reached out, but touched only warmth. Her final words lingered, tender, fading like music across a winter field. "Merry Christmas, my heart." The clock struck 3. The candles guttered. Thomas was alone again. But this time, the emptiness was peaceful. He looked toward the piano. The keys glowed faintly with a soft golden light. On the music stand lay a single handwritten page. The carol, complete at last. Dawn unfolded across London like a wash of gold. The snow had stopped, leaving a fragile brightness over every rooftop. Thomas stood by the window of Elena Nena's house, gazing out at the quiet street. Thin spirals of smoke curled from chimneys. Far off, church bells tolled softly for Christmas Day, their sound gentle and alive, echoing through the waking city. He turned back to the piano. The page still lay there, ink glimmering faintly. At the top, new words appeared, words that hadn't been there before. For the living, let the heart remember. He traced a trembling finger along the page, feeling the warmth still lingering in the ink. It was real as his grief, and the calm beginning to rise in its place. He folded the sheet carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. Then something caught his eye, a small white feather resting by the candlestick dusted with frost. A quiet smile touched his lips. He picked it up. The frost melted at his touch, and for a brief moment the air filled with the scent of lilac. He looked around the room one last time, the stubbed candles, the faded portraits, the hush that held everything gently. Then he opened the front door. Cold air swept in, clean and bright. The sky was a pale rose, promising warmth after a long winter's night. Thomas stepped outside and closed the door behind him. The latch clicked softly, final, but kind. The house seemed different now. The ivy shone green again, the windows caught the light, and though no one had lived there for years, a thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney. He stood quietly, the feather still in his hand. "Merry Christmas, Elena Nena," he whispered. The breeze lifted the feather, carried it up into the golden sky until it vanished from sight. For the first time in years, Thomas smiled, a true, unburdened smile. He turned toward his shop, his boots crunching through the snow. Each step felt lighter, as though the city itself walked beside him. As he passed through the waking streets, bakeries opening, children laughing, carolers gathering by the church, the world seemed alive again. When he reached his little shop, he paused before the frosted window. The faded letters still read, Whitley's books and curiosities. He brushed away the snow and peered inside. Dust covered everything, but beneath it lay his old shelves, the counter, the hearth waiting for flame. He unlocked the door. The bell above it chimed softly, that same familiar note. The scent of old paper and wood wrapped around him like a hug. Thomas placed the folded music on the counter, crossed to the fireplace and struck a match. The logs caught quickly, the golden fire painting the room in warmth. He stood watching the flames for a long moment, then unwrapped his scarf and whispered into the quiet, "Let the heart remember." The wind murmured softly through the window cracks, and for just a heartbeat, faint and far, he thought he heard her laughter in the morning air. The fire crackled, the light flickered across the shelves. The little bookshop breathed again. He moved behind the counter and began to tidy up. The work was slow, but it felt right, a rhythm he hadn't known in years. Each small motion grounded him, brushing the restlessness from his hands. He wiped the old wooden surface, straightened a leaning stack of books, swept the corners where cobwebs had gathered like forgotten whispers. With every act, a little more of the chill seemed to fade from the room. By the time the morning sun began to slant through the front window, he reached for a small wooden placard that hadn't seen light in years. The paint was chipped, but the letters still showed clearly. Open. He hung it on the door, a faint smile touching his face, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the fire. Not long after, the bell above the door jingled. Thomas looked up, startled. A small boy peeked in, no more than 10, cheeks red from the cold, a wool cap crooked on his head. He clutched a few coins tightly in his mittened hand. "Mister," the boy said shyly, "are you really open?" Nobody said this shop still was Thomas's heart softened. "Yes," he said, voice warm. "Yes, we are." "Come in, lad. The fire's still going." The boy stepped inside, eyes wide as he took in the shelves. "Smells like Christmas," he said, grinning. Thomas chuckled softly. "It does, doesn't it?" The boy wandered between the rows of books, brushing his small fingers over the spines. "Do you have stories about ghosts?" he asked, glancing up. Thomas paused, then smiled gently. "A few," he said. "But kind ones, the sort that remind us to keep our hearts open." His eyes flicked toward the fireplace as he spoke. The flames fluttered, throwing a shimmer of gold against the far wall. And for an instant, just a flicker, he thought he saw the faint outline of a woman standing near a piano that wasn't there anymore. Then it was gone, leaving only light. The boy picked out a small green-covered book and laid his coins carefully on the counter. Thomas wrapped it neatly in brown paper, tied it with twine and handed it to him. "There you are," he said softly. "A story for Christmas morning." "Thank you, sir," the boy chirped, then dashed out into the snow, the bell jingling behind him. Thomas watched him go, his smile calm and full. The light outside had grown bright now, filling the shop with golden warmth. He felt no loneliness, no sorrow, only a quiet stillness, as if something had finally settled into its place. He returned to the counter, unfolded the sheet of music Eleanor had left, and placed it beside the register. The title shimmered faintly in the sunlight, "For the Living," and as the distant carols drifted once more through the streets, Thomas whispered to himself, "Then let this be where it begins again." The fire sighed softly in reply. The morning grew brighter, and the streets outside the shop began to stir with life. Footsteps crunched through the fresh snow, voices echoed in the crisp air, and the sweet scent of roasted chestnuts drifted from a nearby cart. The city that had slept beneath frost and silence now breathed again, slow, tentative, full of promise. Thomas stepped outside for a moment. The sunlight glinted on the snow like 1,000 tiny stars. His breath rose in pale clouds as he watched a mother guide her children along the cobblestones, their laughter ringing through the chill. A couple hurried past, bundled in scarves and coats, whispering something that made him smile quietly to himself. When he returned to the shop, the bell above the door jingled again. This time it was a young woman with rosy cheeks and a basket of fruit and parcels tucked under her arm. "Good morning," she said softly. "I heard you were open again." Thomas nodded, warmth in his voice. "Welcome. Come in." The fire's still kind. She stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat, her eyes lighting as she looked around. It smells like stories, she murmured, almost to herself. Like Christmas from long ago. He smiled. That's the hope. Take your time. She moved slowly among the shelves, fingertips tracing the book spines, whispering titles under her breath. I never even knew this shop existed, she said, half in wonder. And yet somehow it feels like it's always been here. Thomas watched her, his chest warm with quiet contentment. The morning no longer felt like just another day. It felt like a beginning. The air held a new softness, as if Eleanor's presence lingered gently between the walls, comforting and unseen. The past and the present seemed to blend together, teaching him that even the quietest winters could hold light. Soon another visitor appeared, an elderly man with a cane, carrying a bundle of letters. He nodded to Thomas, eyes bright with memory. I've missed this place, he said quietly. It's been years, but I never forgot it. Thomas guided him toward the fire. The man settled into a chair, spreading the letters across his lap. I used to come here for the stories, he said, and the music. Thomas's gaze drifted to the folded sheet of music near the register. The notes seemed to shimmer faintly in the sunlight, as if listening. Music, Thomas said softly, can hold more than sound. It carries memory and hope. The old man nodded, his eyes misting. Then may it always carry both, he murmured. Outside, the snow sparkled on rooftops and lampposts. Children ran past, throwing snowballs, their laughter weaving through the sound of church bells. Every sound, every motion felt like a small miracle after so many silent years. Thomas brushed his fingers over the sheet of music again, feeling a quiet warmth beneath his touch, the soft, lingering promise of Eleanor's presence. For the first time in years, he truly believed that stories, love and memory could endure beyond loss, carrying through both frost and fire. As the city eased into Christmas Day, Thomas knew this morning was more than a return. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The fire glowed gently, echoing the rhythm of his heart. The shop, alive once more, welcomed anyone seeking warmth, stories, and the quiet magic of a long-forgotten Christmas night. By mid-morning, the little store was humming with life. The fire's warmth reached every corner, mingling with the scent of pine, wax, and old paper. Outside, the streets sparkled, and carolers' voices drifted faintly through the cold air. Thomas was straightening a shelf when the door chimed again. A young girl, no older than 12, stepped in, holding a small wooden box in her gloved hands. Her eyes were bright with excitement. Good morning, she said softly. I thought you might like this. Thomas looked curiously at the box, simple but polished to a soft shine. What is it? He asked gently. The girl hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were hand-carved wooden figures, angels, children, tiny animals. We made them for Christmas, she said. Some of us sing carols outside, some help at home, but we wanted to give them to someone who loves stories and music, someone who might have loved Christmas once too. Thomas's throat tightened. He reached out, taking the box carefully in both hands. The figures were warm and smooth, shaped with care. They're beautiful, he said quietly. Thank you, truly. The girl smiled shyly. Merry Christmas, she whispered, then twirled and ran back out into the snow, her laughter echoing through the street. Thomas set the box beside Eleanor's sheet of music and stood there for a while, just watching the sunlight pour through the window, catching on the brass handles and polished wood. Outside, the carolers' voices rose softly, harmonies floating through the crisp air. He thought of Eleanor, of her piano, her laughter, her warmth, and realized that Christmas wasn't only a memory of the past. It belonged to the living, to every small kindness, every song, every hand reaching for another. He lifted one of the little wooden angels, turning it slowly in the light. Its carved wings caught the sun, scattering tiny shadows across the counter. He smiled. "Yes," he whispered, "this is exactly how it should be." He sat near the fire, letting Eleanor's melody play again in his mind while the carved figures seemed to keep gentle watch. Outside, children ran laughing through the snow, their voices blending with the toll of the church bells, the sound of a Christmas reborn. For Thomas, this quiet morning, filled with warmth, memory, and new light, felt like his first truly living moment in years. The fire crackled softly, the snow glittered outside, and the shop, glowing in its golden light, opened its doors to anyone who came searching for stories, music, or the gentle magic only a Victorian Christmas could hold. By late morning, the streets of London were fully alive again. Children tumbled through the snowdrifts, leaving trails of footprints that crisscrossed the cobblestones. Shopkeepers raised their shutters and hung wreaths glittering with frost. The church bells rang more warmly now, their tones rich and full. Inside, the air shimmered with warmth. Dust motes floated lazily through sunbeams pouring in from the front window, giving the room an almost dreamlike glow. Thomas moved among the shelves, arranging books, setting out a few titles in the light where their covers caught the sun. The bell rang once more. A young man entered, cheeks flushed from the cold, scarf slipping loose, a small bundle of letters tucked beneath his arm. "Good morning," he said, a little nervous but smiling. "I heard this place had reopened. I used to live nearby. Thought I'd see if it still keeps stories." Thomas returned the smile. "You've come to the right place," he said. "Sit by the fire. There's warmth and plenty of stories." The young man nodded, settling into a chair near the hearth. His eyes landed on the carved figures and then on the empty piano that still seemed to glow faintly in memory. "It feels," he said softly, "like it's been waiting all along." Thomas nodded. "It has," he said. "Sometimes places remember us long before we remember them." Outside, a gust of wind stirred the snow, sending flakes swirling down from the rooftops like drifting light. For a heartbeat, a shadow brushed the window, faint, fleeting, but familiar. Thomas's chest tightened. He turned toward it, but there was nothing there, only snow, only light. Still, he felt it, a presence, soft and unseen, like warmth held in memory. A reminder that love doesn't vanish. It changes shape. It lingers, quietly watching, gently keeping time with every heartbeat and every song. And in that quiet, with the fire murmuring and the city alive beyond the door, Thomas Whitby smiled, knowing the story at last had found its home. Eleanor's music, her laughter, and the quiet grace she left behind still seemed to drift through the room, soft as the falling snow. Thomas's gaze fell again on the sheet of music. He brushed his fingers lightly across the inked lines, the notes almost seeming to hum under his touch, carrying her voice through the still air. The young man noticed and tilted his head. "May I?" he asked, motioning toward the page. Thomas nodded, feeling something stir deep inside him. "Of course," he said gently. "Play it if you like. The song belongs to the living." As the young man began to hum the melody, the warmth in the room deepened. It wasn't just the crackle of fire or the light pouring in from the windows. It was life itself. The comfort of shared presence, of voices joining, of hearts open. In that soft harmony, the little bookshop seemed to breathe, as if, after years of silence, it had finally remembered how to feel alive. Outside, the snow drifted lazily in the pale winter sun, each flake catching the light like a spark. London itself seemed to pause, quiet, glowing, and full of possibility. As the day went on, the warmth within the shop grew stronger. It spread over the shelves, the worn floorboards, and the stacks of books that lined the room. Thomas moved slowly among them, straightening spines and brushing dust from corners long forgotten. Every motion felt unhurried and deliberate, an act of care, of belonging. The air carried the scent of pine from the small branches he'd placed in glass jars along the window, mixed with the sweetness of cinnamon and vanilla from a nearby bakery. Then the bell above the door jingled again. This time a small group of carolers stood outside, children bundled in scarves, their parents beside them, holding a basket wrapped with paper and twine. As they stepped in, the warm smell of sugar and spice filled the shop. "Merry Christmas!" they sang brightly, their voices rising in harmony with the church bells echoing down the street. Thomas smiled, his heart swelling. "And a Merry Christmas to all of you. Please, come, warm yourselves by the fire." The children crowded close to the hearth while the adults smiled and exchanged nods. One woman stepped forward and handed him a small bundle tied with red ribbon. "We thought this might make your shop smell festive," she said softly. "It brings comfort on cold mornings." Thomas inhaled deeply. The scent, sweet, rich and sharp, stirred memories of Elena's kitchen, of tea steaming in porcelain cups, of songs hummed through laughter and snowlight. His eyes softened. He placed the cinnamon bundle carefully in a small vase on the counter. The children began to sing a carol, shyly at first, then with confidence, their voices threading through the crackle of the fire. Thomas joined in quietly, his tone low and steady. For a brief moment, the entire shop seemed to exhale. The flames shimmered, dust motes danced through sunbeams, and the air glowed with something almost alive. On the counter, the wooden figures caught the light, angels, children, and tiny animals carved by gentle hands. Their shadows flickered on the floor as Thomas knelt beside them. He lifted a small angel, turning it toward the fire. Its wings shimmered gold, and in their reflection, he saw the same warmth mirrored in his own eyes. He realized then that Christmas wasn't only about memories, it was about presence, about the living, the laughter, the acts of kindness that stitched warmth into the cold. Elena might be gone, but her spirit lingered in every note, every smile, every glint of light that filled the room. When the carolers finished, Thomas clapped softly. "Thank you," he said, voice thick with feeling. "You've brought Christmas right into the heart of this shop." They grinned, cheeks glowing, then disappeared back into the sunlight, leaving behind a faint trail of laughter, cinnamon, and joy. Thomas turned back to the counter, his hand resting on Elena's music. "Yes," he whispered, smiling faintly. "This is how it should be. Christmas made of warmth, of life, of love remembered." Outside, the snow sparkled in the fading light, a quiet reminder that even the coldest winters could hold beauty and grace. As the day softened into evening, the pale sun began to slip lower, painting long golden streaks across the cobblestones. The shadows stretched along the buildings, the city draped in a warm amber glow. Thomas stood by the window, watching frost catch the last of the light. The world seemed hushed, intimate, as if the city itself were holding its breath before nightfall. Inside, the firelight cast rippling patterns across the bookshelves. The air was rich with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and aged paper, comforting, timeless, alive. Thomas ran his fingers along the spines of books, feeling their weight, their stories, their quiet pulse. Then the door jingled softly once more. A middle-aged woman stepped inside, her shawl dusted with snow. In her arms she carried a small basket tied with a red ribbon. "Good evening," she said gently. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Thomas said warmly. "Please, come in. Warm yourself by the fire." She placed the basket on the counter. Inside were delicate pastries, sugared cakes, and tiny fruit tarts. "For Christmas?" she said. A gift for those who keep stories alive. Thomas's chest tightened with gratitude. That's very kind, he murmured, setting the basket beside the wooden figures. A perfect fit, as if Elela Nena herself had arranged it. Everything in the shop, the music, the fire, the laughter, the gifts, felt touched by her lingering magic. The woman moved toward the window, gazing out at the softly falling snow. It's a gentle night, she said quietly. A good one for remembering, and for welcoming what's to come. Thomas nodded. Even the smallest warmth, he said, can light the coldest winter. She smiled, then slipped out into the twilight. The bell chimed softly behind her. For a moment, the whole world outside seemed suspended, golden, serene, wrapped in a hush of peace. Thomas returned to the chair by the hearth, letting the quiet settle around him. The fire glowed softly, warming his hands and face. The scent of cinnamon, pine, and sugar lingered in the air. Through the frosted window, the amber light of evening melted into blue. He closed his eyes and let it all wash through him, the music, the memory, the warmth, and felt, for the first time in years, utterly at peace. Elela Nena's presence lingered softly, like a whisper in the firelight, calm, familiar, and comforting. Her melody still floated through Thomas's mind, a quiet hymn that bridged past and present, memory and hope, life and the love that never truly fades. Outside, the daylight dimmed, and the room grew wrapped in a tranquil golden glow that welcomed the coming evening. Sitting in his little bookshop, surrounded by warmth and flickering light, Thomas felt a peace that seemed to breathe from the walls themselves. That tender kind of magic only a true Christmas night can hold. As dusk deepened, the fire painted gentle waves of amber across the shelves. The noise of the city outside had faded to a soft hush, broken only by distant church bells marking the hour. The last of the snow clung to rooftops, glowing faintly under the lamps as though dusted by starlight. Then the small brass bell above the door jingled. A familiar couple from down the lane stepped inside, their coats glistening with tiny snowflakes. "Good evening," the woman greeted warmly, her smile bright. "We heard your shop was open again. We thought we'd bring a bit of Christmas cheer." In her hands, she carried a small basket of fresh biscuits, the scent of sugar and butter, blending perfectly with the room's warmth. Thomas's heart swelled. "You're most welcome," he said, smiling. "Please come sit by the fire." They settled into the soft glow, their faces bright with the firelight. Thomas poured tea, the fragrant steam curling through the air. As they spoke, the sound of their laughter and gentle conversation filled the space, turning the quiet room into something alive. They shared stories of Christmases long past, snowy markets, candlelit windows, and nights filled with song. Thomas listened with quiet joy, adding his own memories of Elela Nena, of the shop, of London blanketed in white. Outside, the wind whispered down the street, stirring loose flakes into tiny whirlwinds beneath the lamps. But inside, the warmth felt complete. Every sound, the crackle of fire, the clink of teacups, the soft murmur of voices, wove together like music. Thomas looked around, taking in the scene, the flickering firelight, the little wooden figures on the counter, the faint scent of cinnamon and pine. He realized that this gentle harmony of memory, warmth, and presence was Christmas itself. When the couple rose to leave, they left behind a trail of laughter and the faint sweetness of baked sugar. Thomas walked them to the door, watching as they disappeared into the soft glow of falling snow. Back at the counter, he rested a hand on Elela Nena's music sheet. Its surface felt alive beneath his fingers, humming faintly with memory. The fire popped, and Thomas smiled. Peaceful for the first time in years, surrounded by warmth, life, and the kind of love that never leaves completely. Outside, the city seemed to pause, still, reverent, waiting for night to fall. Inside, the shop glowed like a lantern against the cold. As twilight settled into evening, the fire burned brighter, wrapping the room in gold. Thomas moved slowly between the shelves, brushing his fingers along the books as if greeting old friends. Each one held a story, a fragment of the past that felt suddenly close again. The doorbell chimed softly. A young man stepped in, brushing snow from his shoulders. He held a small wooden box in his hands and smiled shyly. "Good evening," he said. "I wasn't sure anyone would still be open." I saw the lights. Thomas returned the smile. "Come in, warm yourself. There's room for one more by the fire." The young man set the box down, revealing tiny hand-carved figures, children, animals, angels, each carved with astonishing care. "I made these," he said quietly. "I thought someone might like them for Christmas. Maybe they could be part of a story." Thomas lifted one of the angels and turned it in the light. Its smooth surface shimmered in the fire's reflection. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you." The young man looked around, his expression full of quiet wonder. "It feels magical in here," he said. Thomas nodded, feeling something deep and tender stir within him. "That's the gift of Christmas," he replied. "The warmth of being together, the stories we share, reminders that even in the coldest times, light and love still endure." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in silver. Inside, the air was rich with the scent of pine and cinnamon, and the calm glow of the fire wrapped the room like an embrace. Thomas placed the carvings beside Elelenena's sheet of music. For a moment he listened, to distant carols drifting through the night, to the soft hiss of the fire, to the steady rhythm of his own heart. Christmas, he thought, isn't just about what's gone. It's about what still lives, what can still be shared and remembered. The night deepened, and the shop felt alive with quiet joy. The city outside glittered under a veil of frost, every window a tiny island of warmth. The bell above the door rang again, and this time a young woman stepped in, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She carried a bundle of evergreen branches tied with red ribbon. "Good evening," she said gently. "I brought these. I thought they might brighten your shop for Christmas." Thomas smiled, touched by the simple kindness. "You're most welcome," he said. "Come, the fire's waiting." She arranged the branches in a vase near the counter. The scent of pine deepened in the air, blending with cinnamon and smoke. Her gaze fell to the sheet of music, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels like someone's still here," she said. Thomas's smile softened. "Even when they're gone," he replied, "love has a way of staying with us. It never really fades. It just changes shape." Outside, snow began to fall again, sparkling like stars. The woman hummed softly, and the quiet melody mingled with the distant sound of bells. Thomas glanced toward the counter, where the angel figure glowed faintly in the firelight. "Christmas," he murmured, "is a kind of magic. Even the smallest gesture, a song, a gift, a story, can bring light into the dark." The woman nodded, her eyes warm. "And it reminds us to keep our hearts open," she said, "no matter how long the winter feels." Thomas closed his eyes, breathing in the air thick with warmth and memory. The shop glowed gently, alive again after so many silent years. Outside, London slept beneath its soft white blanket. Inside, love, life and remembrance quietly intertwined, unbroken. The wind whispered through the streets, carrying the sound of carols and the shimmer of snowflakes. Standing in his small, golden-lit shop, Thomas knew that this Christmas, with its light, its stories, and its gentle magic, would stay with him forever. The fire burned low, its soft hum filling the quiet. Thomas moved slowly along the shelves, fingers tracing spines like old friends. Every book, Every corner of the room seemed to breathe. When the bell above the door rang once more, a small boy entered, scarf wrapped snugly around his neck. He held a bundle of handwritten pages tied with string. "Good evening, sir," the boy said shyly. "These are stories my grandmother wrote about Christmas and magic. I thought you might like them." Thomas smiled, his heart glowing with gratitude. "Bring them here, lad," he said gently. "Stories like that should be shared." He untied the bundle carefully, lifting the pages one by one. The handwriting was simple, but full of life. Tales of snowy nights, families gathered by firelight, and small miracles hidden in the everyday. As he read, the firelight flickered brighter, as if the shop itself were listening. The scent of cinnamon deepened, the shadows danced along the walls, and Thomas felt the pulse of life weaving through the air. Memory, warmth and love, all alive again in the heart of winter. The small wooden figures on the counter, the angel among them, seemed to tilt ever so slightly toward the sound of music, as if they were listening. "Do you believe in magic?" the boy asked, his voice low, almost afraid to break the stillness of the room. Thomas looked up and met his wide eyes. "I do," he said softly. "But magic isn't always loud or bright. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides in stories, in songs, in small acts of kindness, and in hearts that still remember love." The boy smiled faintly, his eyes glowing in the firelight. He sat on a stool by the hearth, and Thomas joined him, reading aloud from the bundle of stories beside them. The room seemed to wrap itself around their voices. The warmth of the fire, the flicker of light, the soft hum of something ancient that felt alive. Outside, snow kept falling in slow, sparkling drifts, settling on window ledges and cobblestones. Inside, the little shop felt sacred, a place where time moved slower, where every word, every note, every flicker of flame carried the echo of Elena's spirit. Thomas could almost feel her presence in the air, gentle, watching, reminding them both that the real magic of Christmas lived in love remembered, shared, and quietly kept alive. A soft gust brushed against the window panes. The wind sighed like a tired ghost, and Thomas felt a peace settle deep in his chest. The fire, the stories, the visitors, they all blended together into something warm and living, a melody of memory and life that promised comfort, even through the longest winter night. Evening deepened, turning the shop golden with the glow of firelight. The flames licked gently at the hearth, their shadows dancing softly across the floorboards, and the shelves lined with books and wooden toys waiting to be found. The scent of pine, cinnamon, and old paper drifted through the air, familiar and soothing, like an embrace that never let go. Then the bell over the door jingled, light and cheerful. Thomas looked up. A small group of children stood just outside, bundled in wool coats and scarves, peeking in shyly. Their cheeks were flushed red from the cold, eyes bright with excitement. One little girl, her grin playful and proud, stepped forward holding a small bundle wrapped in worn paper. "Good evening," she said, almost whispering. We made this for you. For Christmas." Thomas felt warmth bloom in his chest. "Thank you," he said gently. "Come in. The fire's warm." They hurried inside, snowflakes glittering on their coats like tiny stars in the light. As they shook off the cold, Thomas carefully unwrapped the small package. Inside were hand-carved animals, tiny foxes, birds, rabbits, each painted in bright, careful strokes. The children giggled softly, their laughter light and pure, filling the shop with a kind of energy that felt alive. Thomas knelt beside them, picking up a small fox, tracing the painted fur with his fingers. "These are beautiful," he whispered. "You've captured the spirit of the forest, even in winter." The children began to chatter, explaining how they made each figure, which stories they belonged to, which animals they imagined running through snowy woods. Thomas listened, smiling, letting the sound of their voices mix with the crackle of the fire. The warmth in the room felt deeper now, something more than heat. Then a boy with big brown eyes asked, "Do you think stories ever come alive, sir?" Thomas looked at the music sheet on the counter, at the wooden figures, at the fire that seemed to breathe in rhythm with the night. He smiled softly. "I think they do. Not always in ways you can see, but in ways you can feel, in laughter, in kindness, in the quiet moments that make your heart glow." The children grew quiet, as if they understood something larger than words, then burst into small giggles, sharing a secret between them. Their laughter mingled with the soft whisper of the wind outside, filling the shop with warmth that no storm could chase away. Thomas watched them, feeling that same peace return, deep and steady. Every smile, every gentle laugh was a reminder that both life and Christmas were made from moments like these, quiet, warm, and softly magical. When the children finally bundled up to leave, the shop felt lighter, brighter, as if their joy had left a trace in the air,